Clara had always been quiet, the kind of person who blended into the background without anyone noticing. She lived in a small town where everyone seemed to know each other, and people quickly formed opinions about those they thought were important or talented. Clara didn't seek attention, and that was why most people overlooked her. She loved music more than anything else in the world. The piano was her escape, her secret place where she could express everything she felt but never said out loud. Her fingers would dance across the keys in her room for hours, alone in the soft glow of her desk lamp. The melodies she created were full of emotion, yet they were meant only for her. No one had ever told her that her music was special, and she never thought to show it to anyone. Her home was small, cozy, and always filled with the faint scent of flowers from her mother's garden. Clara's parents had always been supportive in their quiet way. They didn't understand music the way she did, but they saw how happy it made her and never stopped her from practicing. Sometimes they would listen from the other room and smile softly when they heard her play, but they never interfered. It wasn't that anyone discouraged her. It was just that Clara existed in a world where no one really looked closely. At school, she was the same. She didn't speak much in class and often kept to herself. While other students competed for attention, Clara was content with sitting quietly in a corner, listening to others, and watching life move around her. Even though she was quiet, Clara was observant. She noticed things others didn't. The way sunlight reflected on the piano keys, the gentle hum of the radiator in winter, or the tiny birds that perched on the window outside her room while she practiced. These small details found their way into her music. She had an incredible ability to turn everyday moments into melodies that felt alive, and yet she never shared them with anyone. She had learned early on that people judged quickly and moved on just as fast. It wasn't that she didn't want friends or recognition. It was that she had grown accustomed to being invisible. Despite her quiet life, Clara had a secret dream. She longed to play in front of an audience, to let people feel the emotions she poured into her music. But the fear of being laughed at or ignored held her back. She had watched many school recitals and concerts, noticing how some students would step onto the stage and immediately draw the audience's attention with flashy performances or bold personalities. Clara knew she didn't have that kind of presence. Her strength was in subtlety, in the quiet depth of her music, but she worried that subtlety would be overlooked, just like she often was. Her classmates, for the most part, were unaware of her talent. They saw her as shy, maybe a little strange, and never imagined she could be remarkable at something like the piano. Some whispered jokes when she walked by, commenting on how soft-spoken she was or how she always seemed lost in thought. Others simply didn't notice her at all. Clara had learned to live with this, to smile politely when someone addressed her and then retreat into her own world. She didn't mind being unnoticed most days because her music gave her a sense of fulfillment that nothing else could. Clara's practice routine was rigorous. She had a small keyboard in her room when she was younger, and then, as she grew, her parents had bought her a proper piano. It wasn't grand or fancy, but it was enough for her to express herself fully. She would spend hours practicing scales, perfecting pieces, and experimenting with her own compositions. Every note mattered to her, and she was relentless in her pursuit of precision and emotion. Even when she made mistakes, she didn't get frustrated. She learned to listen to herself, to feel the music rather than just play it mechanically. It was this dedication that made her music so compelling, though no one outside her room knew it. Her teachers at school had noticed her quiet nature but didn't see her talent. In music class, she would play the pieces flawlessly, but she never performed with showmanship. She didn't raise her hand to volunteer for solos, and she rarely participated in competitions. Most teachers assumed she was just another student who was competent but not extraordinary. Clara didn't mind. She wasn't playing for recognition. She was playing for herself. Still, deep down, she sometimes wished someone would notice her, even a little. It was a fragile hope that she kept carefully tucked away. Her best friend, who shared her love of music, had moved away a year ago, leaving Clara even more isolated in her musical journey. Without someone to encourage her or share in her excitement, she often practiced alone, late at night, in the quiet house. Her parents would occasionally check on her, finding her lost in music, fingers moving gracefully over the keys, eyes closed, completely absorbed. Those nights were magical for Clara. In her small room, with only the piano and the soft glow of the lamp, she felt free and alive. She imagined crowds listening to her, eyes closed, moved by every note. But it was just a dream, a distant vision she dared not speak of. School life carried on around her. Students competed for awards, recognition, and attention. Clara stayed in the background, unnoticed yet always present. She observed the social dynamics with a quiet curiosity, never judging but always understanding. She noticed the students who performed with confidence and the ones who struggled, the ones who sought attention and the ones who were shy like her. She admired their courage, even if she couldn't summon the same level of boldness herself. Yet, in the depths of her heart, she knew that if given the chance, her music could speak in ways words never could. One day, the school announced the annual piano recital. The announcement was made with excitement, encouraging students to sign up and showcase their talent. Clara felt a flicker of hope but also fear. She wanted to participate, but the thought of standing on stage with all eyes on her terrified her. What if no one listened? What if they laughed? What if her music went unnoticed, just like her? Despite these fears, she signed up quietly, determined to try. She spent the next weeks practicing tirelessly, perfecting every note, imagining how it would feel to finally share her music with an audience. As the recital approached, Clara's anxiety grew, but so did her excitement. She could imagine herself walking onto the stage, sitting at the piano, and letting the music flow. She thought about how the notes would sound in the auditorium, how they might reach the people listening, and how, for once, she might not be invisible. The anticipation was both thrilling and terrifying. She rehearsed her piece over and over, sometimes stopping to close her eyes and feel the music, letting it guide her fingers. Each practice session brought her closer to the moment she had been dreaming of for years. Even though Clara felt nervous, she remained determined. She knew this recital was an opportunity, a chance to step out of the shadows and let the world hear the music that had lived inside her all these years. It didn't matter what anyone thought. What mattered was that she would play with everything she had. The thought of finally expressing herself fully, of letting the music speak her story, gave her courage. She didn't yet know that this one recital would change everything for her. But deep down, Clara felt a spark of hope, a quiet belief that maybe, just maybe, people would finally notice her and the music she had loved so dearly all her life. As the day of the piano recital approached, Clara felt a mix of excitement and nervousness she had never experienced before. Her room, once a quiet place for solitary practice, now seemed smaller and more alive with anticipation. Every time she sat at the piano, she imagined the big stage, the audience filled with parents, teachers, and music lovers, and the lights shining down on her. She rehearsed the opening measures of her piece again and again, listening carefully to the sound, making small adjustments, and ensuring that each note would convey the feeling she wanted to share. Each time she finished, she felt a small surge of confidence, followed by the familiar flutter of anxiety in her stomach. She knew this was her chance, but she also knew that stepping into the spotlight was not easy for someone like her. Her parents noticed the changes in her. They saw her practicing longer, more intensely, and even talking to herself quietly about how she would play. They offered gentle encouragement, reminding her that all that practice was preparing her for a moment that could be unforgettable. Clara appreciated their support, even though she mostly kept to herself. Their quiet pride gave her strength, helping her believe even a little that maybe this time someone would really listen. At school, the announcement of the recital had created a buzz among the students. Everyone was talking about who would play, who would be the star performer, and who would be disappointing. Clara felt invisible among the chatter. Students who were usually loud and confident were already planning their performances, discussing costumes, and trying to impress the teachers. Clara knew she didn't fit that mold. She wasn't flashy, she didn't seek attention, and she didn't know how to make people look at her. But she had something they didn't. A depth of music that came from years of practice, and a love that ran deeper than anything else in her life. The day before the recital, Clara spent hours in her room, going over every piece, every passage, every subtle detail of her performance. She imagined herself sitting at the piano on stage, seeing the audience, and feeling the first note vibrate through the air. Her mind created a picture of the entire performance, from the moment she walked onto the stage to the final note hanging in silence. She practiced until her fingers ached and her eyes were tired, but she couldn't stop. This was more than just a recital to her. It was a chance to show the world a part of herself she had always kept hidden. Clara's classmates had mixed reactions to her participation. Some barely noticed her signing up, assuming she would just play quietly in the background. Others whispered among themselves, curious because they had never seen her perform in public. A few students wondered if she could really be that good, but most of them quickly returned to talking about the more confident performers they expected to steal the show. Clara didn't pay attention to these reactions. She didn't play for them. She played for the music, for the emotion that lived inside her, and for the small hope that someone, anyone, might hear it and understand. The morning of the recital was bright and clear. Clara got up early, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. She wore simple clothes, nothing flashy, nothing to draw attention. That wasn't who she was, and she didn't want to be someone else. She had breakfast with her parents, who offered quiet smiles and reassuring words. They didn't push her, didn't overwhelm her with advice. They simply believed in her, and that was enough to give her courage. Arriving at the recital hall, Clara was struck by the size of the space. The stage looked larger than she imagined, the rows of seats stretching out like a sea of faces she didn't yet know. She felt a moment of panic, the old fear whispering that no one would notice her, that she would play and no one would listen. But she took a deep breath, reminding herself of the hours she had spent preparing. She remembered the long nights in her room, the countless times she had practiced each note until it felt right. She reminded herself that the music was hers, and that no matter what happened, she had already given it everything she had. Backstage, other students were warming up, chatting, and laughing. Clara stayed to herself, focusing on the piano she would play, imagining the sound echoing through the hall. She could hear the other performers, their confidence and chatter filling the backstage area. At first, it made her more nervous, but then she realized she didn't need to compete with them. Her music was different. It wasn't about showmanship or being noticed at first glance. It was about depth, feeling, and honesty. That was her strength, and she held on to it tightly. As the first performers went on stage, Clara watched silently from the wings. Some students received applause, others received polite claps. The audience's reactions were varied, but Clara didn't let it shake her. She studied each performance quietly, noticing what worked and what didn't, imagining how she could make her music reach the hearts of the listeners. Every note she heard became a lesson, every melody a reminder of the power of music. Finally, her turn approached. Clara felt a rush of nerves, her palms slightly sweaty, but she also felt a strange calmness. She walked slowly to the piano, noticing the audience's polite attention, their eyes briefly glancing at her before returning to chatting or looking around. For a moment, she felt the old fear of being invisible, but she pushed it aside. She reminded herself that her music would speak louder than any glance or whisper. She sat down, adjusted the bench, and placed her fingers on the keys. The stage lights were warm, the hall was quiet, and the world seemed to hold its breath for her. Clara took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, and let the music flow. The first note was soft but precise, carrying a feeling she couldn't put into words. It was the sound of countless hours of practice, of quiet determination, of dreams held close to the heart. As she continued, her fingers moved with confidence, each note carefully shaped, each melody telling a story. Slowly, the audience began to notice. The chatter faded, eyes turned toward her, and a quiet awe settled over the hall. Clara's music was no longer just a secret she held. It was a voice that demanded attention, a story that needed to be heard. The audience, initially distracted and unsure, became captivated by her performance. Every subtle change in tempo, every gentle pause, Every crescendo captured their attention. Clara's music had a way of reaching people that words never could. Some leaned forward, eyes wide with surprise. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Even the teachers, who had overlooked her talent for so long, sat up straighter, recognizing the depth and emotion in her playing. It was a transformation. The quiet girl who had been ignored for years was now the center of the room, not because she demanded it, but because her music deserved it. As the final notes of her piece echoed through the auditorium, a silence followed. It was a silence full of awe and admiration, the kind that hangs in the air when something beautiful and unexpected has been witnessed. Clara opened her eyes slowly, noticing the expressions of the audience, the subtle nods, the quiet smiles, and the almost imperceptible tears on some faces. She had done it. She had stepped into the spotlight and let her music speak. And for the first time, she realized that being quiet did not mean being invisible. Her dedication, her love for music, and her quiet courage had finally been seen and felt by others. The applause that followed was thunderous, louder than anything Clara had imagined. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was genuine appreciation, respect, and admiration. The students who had ignored her now looked at her with surprise and newfound respect. Clara felt a warmth in her chest, a mix of relief, pride, and happiness. She had taken a step out of the shadows, and the world had listened. The recital had not just been a performance. It had been a moment of recognition, a turning point in her life, and a validation of all the quiet hours she had spent with the piano. In that moment, Clara knew that her music could touch people, change hearts, and make the invisible seen. After the recital, Clara returned home feeling a mix of emotions she had never experienced before. The thrill of performing, the realization that people had truly listened to her music, and the warm applause she had received all mingled together in her mind. Yet beneath that excitement was a quiet reflection. She had stepped into the spotlight, something she had dreamed of for years, and now she was trying to make sense of what it all meant. Clara knew that this was not just a single performance. It was the start of something bigger, a journey where she could finally be seen for who she really was and what her music could convey. The next morning at school, the atmosphere had changed. Students who had ignored her before now looked at her differently. Some whispered among themselves, glancing her way, trying to understand how the quiet girl they had overlooked could produce something so moving. Clara noticed these glances but didn't let them distract her. She had learned to keep her focus on what mattered, the music, the feelings, and the dedication that had brought her this far. Teachers approached her with smiles of surprise and genuine praise, asking her about her practice and encouraging her to perform more often. Clara listened politely, feeling a strange mix of pride and humility. She was happy that her talent had been recognized, but she remained the same quiet, observant girl she had always been. Back home, Clara replayed the recital in her mind. She remembered every note, every moment of connection with the audience, and every subtle reaction from those who had been watching. It amazed her how the room, once filled with chatter and distraction, had fallen silent just because of the music she had created. She realized that people were not just hearing her notes. They were feeling her story, her years of practice, her emotions, and her dedication. That thought made her heart swell with a quiet joy. For the first time, Clara understood the true power of music. Could move people, connect hearts, and speak in ways words never could. Despite the recognition, Clara remained humble. She knew that what mattered most was not the applause or the attention, but the expression of her feelings through the piano. She continued to practice diligently, experimenting with new pieces and composing her own music. Her room became a sanctuary of creativity, a place where every note mattered and every melody told a story. Clara discovered that performing for an audience was not the only way to share her music. Even small moments of self-expression, like playing for herself or for her parents, held incredible value. She learned to appreciate every aspect of her musical journey, knowing that each step, whether big or small, contributed to her growth. Word of Clara's performance spread quietly through the town. People who had attended the recital told friends and family about the girl who had surprised everyone with her talent. Music teachers from nearby schools began to take notice, some reaching out to invite her to workshops or advanced classes. Clara was both excited and nervous about these opportunities. She had spent so long in the background that stepping into a broader world felt overwhelming. Yet, the memory of the silent, attentive audience gave her courage. She reminded herself that her music had power, and that power came from authenticity, practice, and love. As Clara navigated this new attention, she encountered challenges she had never faced before. Some students were jealous of the recognition she had received and tried to undermine her confidence. They made comments about how she had only performed well once or suggested that she was lucky rather than talented. Clara, however, had learned resilience through her years of practice and quiet determination. She listened to these words but didn't let them affect her. Instead, she focused on the music, the joy it brought her, and the people who truly appreciated it. She realized that true talent is recognized not by the loudest voices, but by the genuine connection it creates. Clara also faced moments of self-doubt. She wondered if she could perform again with the same impact, if she could continue to grow, and if her music would always touch people in the way it had during that recital. These doubts were natural, she told herself, part of the journey of anyone who seeks to create something meaningful. Instead of letting fear control her, Clara used it as motivation. She spent hours practicing, experimenting with new techniques, and learning from every mistake. Each challenge became an opportunity to improve, to refine her skill, and to deepen her understanding of music. Her family continued to support her quietly but lovingly. They understood that Clara's journey was personal and unique, and they never pushed her to conform or seek attention. They celebrated her achievements in ways that felt natural, like sharing a meal together, listening to her play, or simply acknowledging her dedication with a smile. This quiet encouragement was invaluable. Clara knew that no matter what happened outside, she had a safe space where her passion was understood and appreciated. Clara's confidence grew gradually. She began to imagine herself performing for larger audiences, perhaps even outside her school, and the thought no longer filled her with fear. Instead, it sparked excitement. She visualized her music reaching people far beyond what she had ever dreamed, touching lives and inspiring others. This vision became a driving force in her life. Clara realized that her quiet nature was not a weakness but a strength. It allowed her to observe, reflect, and create with depth and sensitivity that few others possessed. In the weeks following the recital, Clara's practice sessions became more focused and intentional. She explored different styles of music, experimented with tempo and dynamics, and even tried composing small original pieces. Each day, she discovered something new about her capabilities and her connection to the piano. The music was no longer just a pastime or a private escape. It had become a way of communicating her emotions, her thoughts, and her unique perspective on the world. Clara also began to form small connections with classmates who had previously ignored her. Some approached her to ask questions about her technique, while others expressed genuine admiration for her performance. These interactions were subtle but meaningful. Clara learned that while not everyone would understand or appreciate her music, there were always those who could, and that was enough. She realized that connection through music did not require loud voices or grand gestures. It could happen quietly, sincerely, and profoundly. As Clara reflected on her journey, she understood that the piano recital had been more than just a single event. It had been a turning point, a moment that revealed the power of persistence, dedication, and quiet passion. She knew that there would be more challenges ahead, more performances, and more moments of doubt, but she felt ready. Her music had found its voice, and she had found hers. The world had listened once, and she was determined to continue sharing her gift, one note at a time, with authenticity, emotion, and unwavering dedication. By the end of this chapter of her life, Clara had grown in ways she could not have imagined. She had learned to embrace her quiet nature, to trust her abilities, and to understand that recognition was a byproduct of genuine effort and passion. She no longer measured herself by the attention of others but by the depth of her connection to her music and the impact it could have on those who listened. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a bridge between her inner world and the hearts of others, a tool for expression, and a source of confidence and purpose. Clara's journey was just beginning, but she had taken the first steps with courage, grace, and an unwavering love for the music that defined her. The day of the next recital arrived, and Clara felt a nervous excitement that pulsed through her every step. She had been invited to perform again, this time with the awareness that people remembered her previous performance. Some students looked at her with curiosity, others with envy, and a few with genuine admiration. Clara noticed it all but chose to focus on the music. She knew that what mattered most was not the opinions around her, but the connection she could create through her playing. The piano had become a voice she could trust, and today it would speak louder than her fear. Backstage, Clara adjusted her posture and touched the piano keys, feeling the familiar texture beneath her fingers. The instrument felt alive, as if it recognized her dedication and passion. She closed her eyes for a moment and imagined the audience waiting for her, not with the chatter and whispers of before, but with expectation, ready to hear something beautiful. Her heart raced, yet she felt an inner calm settle over her. She reminded herself that she had practiced for years, every note and rhythm ingrained in her memory. The fear was natural, but the music would guide her. The other performers began their pieces, each displaying confidence, skill, or showmanship. Clara watched quietly, learning from the performances around her. Some were technically strong but lacked emotion. Others were flashy but shallow. Clara knew that her strength lay not in spectacle but in honesty. She did not need to impress with speed or complicated notes. She needed to play with heart, and that was something no one could replicate. She breathed deeply and prepared herself to take the stage, focusing on the story she wanted to tell with her music. When her turn finally came, Clara walked onto the stage with a calm determination. The audience greeted her with polite applause, and she acknowledged them with a small, humble smile. She sat down at the piano, adjusted the bench, and placed her fingers on the keys. For a moment, the hall seemed to hold its breath. Clara took a deep breath herself, feeling the weight of the moment, the anticipation of those watching, and the responsibility she carried to her own music. Then she let the first note fall, clear and intentional, resonating through the hall. From the very beginning, Clara's music was different from what the audience had expected. It was not flashy, not loud, not meant to dazzle immediately. It was subtle, emotional, and full of nuance. Every note seemed to have a purpose, every chord a story to tell. Slowly, the audience began to lean in, listening carefully. The quiet room was filled with the sound of her playing, carrying emotion that words could never express. Clara felt herself become one with the music, her body and mind moving with its rhythm, her heart opening to the story she was sharing. As the piece unfolded, Clara noticed subtle changes in the audience. People who had been distracted or skeptical before were now fully absorbed. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, while others watched her fingers move with amazement. Even the judges, who had seen countless performances, sat up straighter, captivated by the depth and sincerity of her playing. Clara felt a surge of confidence, but it was quiet and controlled. She was not performing for validation. She was performing because this music was a part of her soul, and it demanded to be heard. Her performance was not without challenge. Some passages were technically demanding, requiring precision and concentration. Clara's fingers moved quickly yet gracefully, guided by muscle memory and intuition. She had prepared for these moments for months, and now the preparation bore fruit. Each challenge she faced on stage became an opportunity to showcase not just skill but emotion. She played with intensity when needed and with gentleness when the music called for it. The hall seemed to respond, the air vibrating with the energy of her performance. Halfway through the piece, Clara felt the room transform. The audience's attention was completely captured, no longer polite but genuine. There were moments of silence, where even the slightest sound from outside would have seemed intrusive. People leaned forward, held their breath, and allowed themselves to be carried by the music. Clara noticed the subtle reactions, an occasional tear glistening in someone's eye, a nod of appreciation, a hand pressed lightly to the chest in connection. She realized that her music had found its way into the hearts of those listening, creating an unspoken bond between performer and audience. Clara's mind was focused entirely on the music. She was aware of the stage, the hall, and the audience, but only as context for the notes she played. Her emotions flowed naturally into the melody, shaping the dynamics, tempo, and expression. Each phrase was a conversation, a story being shared. Clara felt the energy of the hall amplify her own emotions, and she allowed herself to respond, improvising subtly where her intuition guided her. The music became alive, a living thing connecting her with everyone present, a shared experience that transcended words. As she approached the final section, Clara felt a sense of completeness. Every note she had played had led to this moment, a culmination of years of practice, dreams, and quiet determination. She allowed the music to swell, to reach its emotional peak, and then gradually fade, leaving space for reflection and silence. The last note hung in the air, resonant and full, before fading into quiet. Clara lifted her hands, took a small breath, and allowed herself a moment to feel the significance of what she had just shared. The silence that followed was profound. The audience, completely moved, did not immediately react. It was a silence of awe, of respect, and of appreciation for something unexpected yet beautiful. Clara opened her eyes and scanned the room, seeing faces transformed by the music, absorbed and deeply touched. She felt a deep sense of connection, knowing that her passion had reached beyond herself and into the hearts of others. In that moment, Clara understood the true power of music, not just to entertain but to communicate, to evoke emotion, and to leave a lasting impression. Slowly, the hall erupted into applause. It was not just polite clapping. It was thunderous, heartfelt, and persistent. Clara's eyes widened slightly, overwhelmed by the response. She had played with honesty and emotion, and the audience recognized it. The judges smiled, some standing, some nodding in admiration. Teachers and classmates alike looked at her differently, no longer as the quiet girl in the background, but as a musician with depth, skill, and emotional resonance. Clara felt a quiet pride, not arrogance, but a deep satisfaction in knowing that she had shared her heart through music. After the performance, Clara received congratulations from teachers and peers. Some students expressed amazement and curiosity, asking how she had managed to play with such feeling and precision. Clara responded humbly, explaining that it came from years of practice and love for the piano. She realized that her approach, quiet dedication, focus, and authenticity, was what set her apart. She didn't need to be the loudest or the flashiest. Her strength lay in the honesty and emotion she brought to her music. This realization gave her a new sense of confidence and purpose. Returning home that evening, Clara reflected on the experience. She replayed each moment in her mind, savoring the connection she had felt with the audience and the profound impact of her music. She understood that this recital had been a turning point, not just in recognition but in her understanding of herself and her abilities. Clara realized that the piano was not just an instrument but a bridge between her inner world and the hearts of others. It allowed her to communicate emotions she could not express in words, to tell stories that resonated deeply, and to create shared experiences that left lasting impressions. Clara continued to practice with renewed purpose. Each day became an opportunity to refine her skill, explore new techniques, and deepen her emotional expression. She experimented with different styles, tempos, and dynamics, learning to trust her intuition and let the music guide her. The piano was no longer just a source of comfort or escape. It was a tool for growth, communication, and connection. Clara felt more alive with every note she played, more confident in her abilities, and more determined to share her gift with the world. Through this journey, Clara learned valuable lessons about perseverance, authenticity, and the power of quiet dedication. She understood that recognition and success are often the byproducts of consistent effort, passion, and honesty rather than showmanship or attention-seeking. She embraced her quiet nature, recognizing that it allowed her to observe, reflect, and create with depth and sensitivity that others might lack. Clara's story was not just about talent, but about courage, determination, and the ability to connect through something as universal as music. The recital had transformed Clara, not only in the eyes of others but in her own perception of herself. She felt a growing sense of purpose and confidence, knowing that her dedication could lead to meaningful experiences and connections. The music had given her a voice, a presence, and a way to touch hearts. Clara knew that there would be more challenges ahead, more performances, and more opportunities to grow. But she also knew that as long as she remained true to herself and her music, she could face anything with courage and grace. In the quiet moments after the recital, Clara sat at her piano at home, fingers resting lightly on the keys, and smiled. She had stepped into the spotlight, shared her heart, and been heard. The journey was far from over, but she had taken a crucial step, one that would shape the path ahead. Her music was no longer just a personal escape. It was a bridge to others, a source of inspiration, and a testament to the power of dedication, authenticity, and passion. Clara's story was unfolding, note by note, and the world was beginning to listen. After her second recital, Clara felt a growing confidence in her abilities. The recognition she received was not overwhelming, but it was enough to make her realize that her music had the power to touch people in a way she had never experienced before. She returned home and spent hours at her piano, experimenting with new pieces and melodies, discovering the ways her emotions could shape her music. Every note was a reflection of her heart, every chord a story that demanded to be told. Clara had learned that music was not just about performing but about connecting, and she wanted to explore that connection even more deeply. At school, things had changed slowly but noticeably. Students who once overlooked her now greeted her with curiosity and cautious respect. Some whispered among themselves, trying to understand how someone so quiet and unassuming could have such talent. Others approached her directly, asking questions about her technique, her practice routines, or her inspiration. Clara answered politely, never boasting, always humble. She realized that the attention was not what mattered most. What mattered was the opportunity to share her music and the impact it could have on others. She began to feel more at ease in the world, knowing that her voice, her music, was being heard. Clara's teachers also began to recognize her potential more fully. Music instructors encouraged her to participate in larger competitions, workshops, and masterclasses. They offered guidance on performance techniques, stage presence, and ways to convey emotion more effectively through her playing. Clara absorbed all of this eagerly, understanding that she still had much to learn. But she also knew that her authenticity, the quiet intensity she brought to every note, was her greatest strength. She resolved to remain true to herself and her music, no matter how much recognition she received. In her room at home, Clara's piano became more than just an instrument. It was a companion, a confidant, and a tool for self-expression. She experimented with different genres, blending classical pieces with her own improvisations, and creating compositions that were entirely unique. Each practice session became an exploration, a journey into the depths of her own emotions and creativity. Clara discovered that music could express what words never could: joy, sorrow, hope, longing, and everything in between. This realization fueled her dedication, making every hour of practice meaningful and transformative. One afternoon, Clara received an invitation to perform at a special community event, a larger stage than she had ever experienced. The thought both excited and terrified her. She knew that the audience would be more diverse, with people who had never seen her perform and who might not understand or appreciate her music. But she also saw it as an opportunity to share her gift with a wider audience, to reach hearts beyond the familiar circle of classmates and teachers. Clara accepted the invitation, feeling a mixture of nervousness and anticipation that energized her in a way she had never felt before. In the weeks leading up to the community performance, Clara practiced diligently. She focused on every aspect of her playing: technique, expression, dynamics, and timing. She imagined herself on the stage, visualizing the audience, the lights, and the sound of the piano filling the hall. Each day, she refined her pieces, experimenting with subtle changes to enhance the emotional impact. Her practice became almost meditative, a way to connect with her inner self while preparing to share her music with others. She felt a sense of purpose and clarity that reinforced her dedication. As the day of the event arrived, Clara experienced a whirlwind of emotions. She was nervous, of course, but there was also a sense of excitement and determination. She knew that this performance could be transformative, not only for her career as a musician, but also for her confidence and self-understanding. She arrived early at the venue, absorbing the atmosphere, watching other performers, and feeling the energy of the event. It was a larger, more formal setting than any recital she had attended before, and the pressure was intense. Yet Clara focused on the music, letting it guide her through the nerves and anticipation. Backstage, Clara took a few moments to center herself. She placed her fingers on the piano keys, feeling the familiar texture beneath her fingertips, and took a deep breath. She reminded herself that she had prepared thoroughly, that her music had power, and that the audience was ready to listen. She closed her eyes briefly, imagining the first note, the way it would resonate through the hall, and the connection it would create with the listeners. When she finally walked onto the stage, she did so with a quiet confidence, aware of the magnitude of the moment but grounded in her passion for music. The audience greeted her with applause, some polite, some enthusiastic. Clara acknowledged them with a small, humble smile, then turned her attention fully to the piano. The first note rang out clearly, rich with emotion and intent. From the very beginning, her performance captivated the audience. Each note carried meaning, each chord conveyed depth, and each transition flowed seamlessly into the next. Clara felt a sense of harmony, a connection with the music that allowed her to convey her story authentically. The audience responded naturally, leaning in, listening intently, and becoming fully absorbed in the performance. As Clara continued, she became aware of subtle reactions from the audience. Faces were attentive, eyes focused, and some listeners even closed their eyes to experience the music more deeply. The hall seemed to transform, filled with an atmosphere of quiet awe and connection. Clara felt the energy of the audience as she played, allowing it to guide her interpretation and expression. She realized that music was a powerful bridge, connecting people across differences, creating a shared emotional experience, and touching hearts in a profound way. Halfway through her performance, Clara encountered a technically challenging section. Her fingers moved swiftly and precisely, guided by years of practice and intuition. She maintained composure, allowing the difficulty to enhance the emotion rather than distract her. Each note was deliberate, each phrase carefully shaped, and the music flowed naturally from her heart. She felt a sense of empowerment, knowing that her dedication had prepared her for this moment, and that her music was reaching the audience in a way that words could never convey. By the final section, Clara was fully immersed in the music. Her emotions guided her playing, her fingers expressing feelings that could not be spoken aloud. The audience was completely captivated, held in the spell of her performance. She allowed the music to rise to its emotional peak, then gradually resolve into a gentle, lingering conclusion. The last note faded into silence, and Clara lifted her hands, taking a moment to absorb the impact of what had just occurred. The hall was quiet, the atmosphere charged with awe, appreciation, and the profound effect of her music. The applause that followed was overwhelming. Clara felt a mixture of relief, pride, and joy. The audience's response was genuine, not just polite, and she could sense the deep connection that had been created. Teachers, fellow musicians, and community members approached her afterward, offering congratulations and praise. Clara received their words with humility, grateful for the recognition but even more aware of the impact her music had made. She realized that her dedication, authenticity, and love for the piano were the true sources of her success. In the days that followed, Clara reflected on the performance and the journey that had brought her to this point. She understood that the recognition and applause were important, But what truly mattered was the connection she had created with the audience, the ability to communicate emotions and stories through her music, and the growth she had experienced as a musician and as a person. Clara continued to practice, explore new pieces, and refine her skill, driven by the understanding that music was not just performance, but a means of expression and connection. Clara's confidence continued to grow, not in arrogance, but in self-assurance and understanding of her abilities. She embraced opportunities to perform, to challenge herself, and to share her music with others. Her quiet dedication became a hallmark of her character, inspiring others to recognize that talent and passion often thrive in subtle, consistent, and authentic effort. Clara's journey demonstrated that even the most overlooked individuals could rise to prominence through perseverance, love for their craft, and the courage to share their gifts with the world. Through this experience, Clara learned that recognition and respect are earned not through seeking attention, but through genuine dedication and authenticity. She realized that her music had the power to create moments of connection, evoke emotions, and leave lasting impressions. Clara felt a deep sense of purpose, knowing that her journey as a musician was only beginning, and that every performance, every practice session, and every note played was a step toward growth, understanding, and sharing her unique voice with the world. The final part of Clara's journey began quietly but with a sense of anticipation she had never felt before. After her previous performances, she had gained recognition, respect, and a deeper understanding of her music, but she also knew that the true test of her growth was yet to come. The opportunity arose when she was invited to perform at a prestigious city recital, a stage much larger than any she had experienced, with an audience composed not only of fellow students and teachers, but also professional musicians, critics, and community leaders. The thought was both thrilling and intimidating. Clara knew that she would need every ounce of focus, skill, and emotion she had cultivated over the years to rise to the occasion. In the days leading up to the recital, Clara's routine was rigorous but purposeful. She practiced with precision, revisiting each piece she would perform, exploring new nuances, and ensuring that her expressions were authentic and true to her emotions. She experimented with dynamics, tempo, and phrasing, learning how small changes could transform the impact of a phrase or chord. Each session at the piano was both a challenge and a discovery, pushing her to deepen her connection with the music and to refine the story she wanted to tell through every note. Her family continued to support her quietly, offering encouragement and understanding. They understood the pressure she faced and respected her need for focus and solitude. Clara appreciated their presence, knowing that she had a safe space to retreat to whenever the weight of expectations felt heavy. This support gave her confidence and allowed her to approach the upcoming performance with a sense of calm determination. The night of the recital arrived. The hall was grand, with high ceilings, polished wooden floors, and rows of seats filled with eager spectators. Clara felt the familiar flutter of nerves, but she also felt a strange excitement, a sense of purpose that steadied her heart. Backstage, she prepared herself, checking the piano, adjusting the bench, and running through the opening notes in her mind. She noticed other performers, some confident, others tense, and some equally quiet like her, lost in their own preparation. Clara understood that each performer had their own story, their own dedication, and their own relationship with the music. She respected that, but she remained focused on her own journey. When it was finally her turn, Clara walked onto the stage with quiet grace. The audience greeted her with polite applause, and she acknowledged them with a small, humble smile. As she sat down at the piano, the stage lights cast a warm glow over her hands and the keys. Clara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment, the anticipation of the audience, and the culmination of years of preparation. She closed her eyes briefly and allowed herself to feel the music within her, letting it guide her fingers and her expression. The first note rang out, clear and precise, resonating through the grand hall. From the very beginning, Clara's performance captured attention. Her music was not about showmanship or speed, but about honesty, depth, and emotion. Every note seemed to carry a story, every chord a subtle conversation with the audience. Slowly, the room transformed. Spectators who had arrived with varying levels of interest or skepticism were now fully engaged, drawn into the narrative of the music. Clara felt a profound connection, the kind she had longed for, as the energy of the hall seemed to merge with her own, creating a shared experience that was both intimate and powerful. Midway through the performance, Clara encountered technically challenging passages. Her fingers moved with precision and confidence, guided by countless hours of practice and an innate understanding of the music. Each movement was deliberate, each expression intentional, conveying the depth of her emotions and the story embedded in the piece. She realized that the audience was not just listening. They were feeling, reacting, and connecting. Some leaned forward, eyes wide with awe. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. The hall seemed to breathe with her, each note a pulse in a larger rhythm of shared experience. As she progressed, Clara's performance grew more expressive. She allowed herself to improvise slightly, to explore subtle variations in tempo and dynamics that reflected her own interpretation and emotion. The music became a living dialogue, a conversation between her and the audience. The initial nerves melted away, replaced by a sense of flow and purpose. Clara understood, in that moment, that her years of dedication, practice, and quiet perseverance had led her to this point. She was not just playing the piano. She was telling her story, sharing her heart, and creating a connection that transcended words. The final section of the piece approached, and Clara poured every ounce of emotion and energy into her playing. The music swelled, filled with intensity, and then gradually softened, leaving space for reflection and silence. The last note lingered in the air, resonant and pure, before fading into quiet. Clara lifted her hands, paused, and allowed herself a moment to breathe and absorb the significance of the performance. The audience, captivated and moved, remained silent for a brief moment, a reverent pause before erupting into applause. The applause was thunderous, genuine, and sustained. Clara felt a mixture of relief, pride, and joy. The audience's reaction was not just for her technical skill, but for the honesty and depth of her performance. Teachers, professional musicians, and audience members alike approached her afterward, offering congratulations, praise, and admiration. Clara received their words with humility, understanding that the recognition was a reflection of her dedication and authenticity, not a measure of her worth. She had shared her music fully, and it had been received in the way she had hoped. In the days following the recital, Clara reflected on her journey. She understood that the true value of her experience was not the applause or recognition, but the connection she had created and the growth she had achieved. She had learned to trust her abilities, to embrace her quiet nature, and to communicate her emotions through music. Clara realized that her perseverance, authenticity, and dedication had allowed her to overcome fear, step into the spotlight, and share something deeply personal and meaningful with the world. Clara continued to practice and perform, each opportunity becoming a chance to refine her skill, deepen her expression, and share her story. She explored new compositions, experimented with different styles, and allowed herself to innovate and improvise. Her music became a reflection of her journey, her emotions, and her growth. She discovered that every performance, every note, and every audience interaction contributed to her understanding of herself and her art. Through her journey, Clara learned valuable lessons that extended beyond music. She understood the importance of perseverance, humility, and authenticity. She recognized that recognition and respect are earned not through seeking attention, but through dedication, passion, and the courage to share one's true self. She embraced her quiet nature, realizing that it allowed her to observe, reflect, and create with depth and sensitivity. Clara's story demonstrated that even those who are overlooked or underestimated can rise to moments of brilliance when they remain true to themselves and their passions. In the final reflection of this chapter of her life, Clara sat at her piano in the quiet of her room, her fingers resting lightly on the keys. She thought of the recitals, the audience, and the journey that had brought her to this moment. She smiled, not with pride alone, but with understanding and gratitude. Her music had given her a voice, a presence, and a means to connect with others in profound ways. She had discovered the power of dedication, the beauty of authenticity, and the joy of sharing her gift. Clara knew that her journey was far from over, but she felt ready for whatever lay ahead. Her music would continue to guide her, inspire others, and shape her path, note by note, story by story.